The next morning I woke cold and hungry and shivering and bitten all over. It took me some moments to remember where I was and all that had happened to me. I was suddenly overwhelmed by one cruel reality after another. My utter aloneness, my separation from my mother and father, and the dangers all around me. I cried aloud in misery until I saw that Stella was gone. I ran out of the cave. She was nowhere to be seen. I called for her. I listened for her, but only the gibbons howled in reply. Then I turned and saw her. She was up on the rocks high above my cave, half hidden from me. But even so, I could see that her head was down. She was clearly intent on something. I clambered up to find out what it was. I heard her drinking before I got there, lapping rhythmically, noisily, as she always did. She did not even look up as I approached. That was when I saw that she was drinking from a bowl, a battered tin bowl. Then I noticed something strange on a flat shelf of rock above her. I left Stella to her water feast and climbed up further to investigate. Another bowl of water, and beside it palm leaves laid out on the rock and half covered by an upturned tin. I sat down and drank the water without pause for breath. Water had never tasted so wonderful to me as it did then. Still gasping, I lifted aside the tin. Fish! Thin strips of translucent white fish, dozens of them, laid out neatly in rows on the palm leaves, and 5, 6, 7 small red bananas. Red bananas! I ate the fish first, savouring each precious strip, but even as I ate, I was looking around me, looking for a telltale trembling of leaves at the edge of the forest or a trail of footprints in the sand. I could see none. Yet someone had brought this to me. Someone must be there. Someone must be watching me. I wasn't sure whether to be fearful at this revelation or overjoyed. Stella interrupted my thoughts. She was whimpering pitifully at me from the rock below, and I knew it wasn't love or comfort she was after. She caught every strip of fish I threw her, snaffled it in one gulp and waited for the next, head on one side, one ear pricked. After that it was one for me, one for her. Her beseeching eyes would not let me do otherwise. The fish was raw, but I did not mind. I was too hungry to mind, and so was Stella. I kept the red bananas all to myself. I ate every single one of them. They weren't at all like bananas back home, but much sweeter altogether, much juicier, much more delicious. I could have eaten a dozen more. Once I'd finished, I stood up and scanned the forest. My benefactor, whoever he or she was, had to be somewhere close by. I was sure I had nothing to fear. I had to make some kind of contact. I put my hands to my mouth and called out again and again, "Thank you! Thank you! Thank you!" My words echoed round the island. Suddenly the forest was alive again, with noise. A great cacophony of singing and hooting and howling and cawing and croaking. Stella barked wildly back at it. As for me, I felt suddenly exhilarated, elated, ecstatically happy. I jumped up and down, laughing and laughing, until my laughter turned into tears of joy. I was not alone on this island. Whoever was here must be friendly. Why else would they have fed us? But why wouldn't they show themselves? They would have to come back for the bowls, I thought. I would leave a message. I found a sharp stone, knelt down, and scraped out my message on the rock beside the bowls. Thank you. My name is Michael. I fell off a boat. Who are you? After that, I determined to remain on the beach all that day and stay close to my cave and the rock above where the fish had been left for us. I would keep it always in sight, so that I would at least be able to see who it was that had helped me. Stella ran on ahead of me down into the sea, barking at me, inviting me to join her. I didn't need any persuading. I plunged and cavorted and whooped and splashed. But through all my antics she just cruised steadily on. She always looked so serious when she swam, chin up and paddling purposefully. The sea was balmy and calm, barely a ripple of wave to be seen. I didn't dare go out of my depth. I'd done that quite enough for a lifetime. I came out clean and refreshed and invigorated, a new person. The sea was a great healer. My bites were still there, but they did not burn any more. I decided I would explore further along the beach, right to the end if I could, just so long as I could keep my cave in view all the time. There were shells here, millions of them, golden and pink, thrown up in long lines along the beach. Before long, I came across what seemed at some distance away like a flat wedge of rock, protruding only very slightly from the sand. Stella was scrambling excitedly at the edge of it. It turned out not to be a rock at all, but a long sheet of rusted metal, clearly all that was left of the side of a ship's hull, now sunk deep into the sand. I wondered what ship it was, how long she had been wrecked. Had some terrible storm driven her onto the island? Had there been survivors? Could any of them still be here? I knelt down in the sand and ran my hand along it. I noticed then a fragment of clear glass lying in the sand nearby, from a bottle perhaps. It was hot to the touch, too hot to handle. It came to me in a flash. Eddie had showed me how to do it. We'd tried it in the playground at school, hiding behind the dustbins where no one could see us. A piece of paper, a bit of grass, and the sun. We had made fire. Sorry, I think I just read that as grass. I should have said glass. So, a piece of paper, a bit of glass, and the sun. We had made fire. I didn't have any paper, but leaves would do. I ran up the beach and gathered whatever I could find from under the trees. Bits of cane, twigs, all sorts of leaves, paper thin, tinder dry. I made a small pile on the sand and sat down beside it. I held my piece of glass close to the leaves and angled it to the sun. I had to keep it quite still and wait for the first wisp of smoke. If only I could get a fire lit, if only I could keep it alight, then I could sleep by it at night. It would keep the flies away, and the animals away too. And sooner or later, a ship had to come by. Someone would spot the smoke. I sat and I sat. Stella came over to bother me. She wanted to play, but I pushed her away. In the end, she went off and sulked, stretching out with a sigh under the shade of the palm trees. The sun was roasting hot, but still nothing happened. My arm was beginning to ache, so I arranged a frame of twigs above the leaves, laid the glass across it, and crouched by it and waited. Still nothing. All of a sudden, Stella sprang up from her sleep, a deep growl in her throat. She turned and ran down towards me, wheeling round to bark her fury at the forest. Then I saw what it was she had disturbed her. A shadow under the trees moved and came lumbering out into the sunlight towards us. A monkey. A giant monkey. Not a gibbon at all. It moved slowly on all fours and was brown, ginger brown. An orangutan, I was sure of it. He sat down just a few feet from me and considered me. I dared not move. When he'd seen enough, he scratched his neck casually, turned, and made his way on all fours slowly back into the forest. Stella went on growling long after he had gone. So there were orangutans here as well as gibbons. Or perhaps it was orangutans that made the howling noise and not gibbons at all. Maybe I'd been wrong all along. I'd seen a Clint Eastwood film once with an orangutan. That one I remembered had been friendly enough. I just hoped this one would be the same. Then I saw smoke. I smelled smoke. There was a glow in amongst my pile of leaves. I crouched down at once and blew on it gently. The glow became flames. I put on a few more leaves, then a dry twig or two, then some bigger ones. I had a fire! I had a fire! I dashed into the forest and collected all the debris, all the dried-up coconut shells, all the wood I could find. Back and forth I went until my fire was roaring and crackling like an inferno. Sparks were flying high into the air. Smoke was rising into the trees behind me. I knew I could not rest now, that the fire would need still more wood, bigger wood, branches even. I would have to fetch and carry, until I was quite certain I had enough to keep it going and enough in reserve. Stella, I noticed, would not come with me into the forest, but stayed waiting for me by the fire. I knew well enough why. I kept a wary eye out for the orangutan myself, but I was too intent on my fire now to worry much about him. My pile of wood was huge by now, but all the same I went back into the forest one last time, just in case the fire burned itself out quicker than I'd expected. I had to go deeper into the forest, so it took a while. I was coming out of the trees, loaded with wood up to my chin, when I realised there was much less smoke coming from the fire than there had been before, and no flames at all. Then, through the smoke, I saw him, the orangutan. He was crouching down and scooping sand onto my fire. He stood up and came towards me, now out of the smoke. He was not an orangutan at all. He was a man. That's where we're going to stop today, 5SDM.